make it say this is a national security thing. And if you get in our way with this, you will be a national security threat.
This is Front and Center with your host, Jacquie Jordan.
Entertainment and pop culture expert Jacquie Jordan is with us.
We are the show where we talk with the change agents, the storytellers, and the activators, making impact from behind the scenes. Welcome to Front and Center. I'm Jacquie Jordan. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have been enjoying our Front and Center episodes, please subscribe to us. This episode, I definitely have a behind the scenes person. Please welcome Austin Steinbart. So let's get right into it about Vegas Strong. Can you talk to us about that? Having been a TV producer, I mean, I've always been suspicious of the JFK assassination, the Oklahoma bombing. I had worked downtown at the World Trade Center for a station called WBIS that like Wall Street Journal was a partner in between the bombing and then the 9/11, which people already forgot that there was actually a bombing at World Trade Center. So I've kind of just been in the crux of conspiracy theory events and have I actually align with you in many of your experiences, but you did a lot of work on the Vegas Strong, so I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, so the Vegas situation, as anybody who was there knows, it was this really wild cover-up, and kind of the baseline premise here was there's this power play going on in Saudi Arabia. And so Mohammed bin Salman, who's the current crown prince, he cut two people in line to get to be the next guy in line for the throne. And so a lot of people don't know this. In Saudi Arabia, the line of succession is not vertical. Like it doesn't usually go from father to son to grandson. It usually goes horizontally, right? So it goes from father to first son to second son, right, to his brother, and
so it'd be like Charles then King Charles going to Andrew instead of William.
Exactly. And then they're also big on building consensus, right? With there's like thousands of royals at this point because they just keep spawning like jackrabbits for who should be next. And so the first guy that Mohammed bin Salman cut line in 2015 was a guy named Mukreen, Mohammed bin Mukreen. And he was the head of the Saudi intelligence services. So essentially that would be like cutting the CIA director in line for the throne.
Which we had George Bush do that here. So we've seen that before. We've seen what that plays out before.
Yep. So that was the actual CIA director. That'd be like cutting him in line. And especially in Saudi Arabia, it's a very precarious situation to be doing that. So there's obviously a lot of bad blood there. And then the next guy that he cut in line, he was the head of the Saudi domestic intelligence services. And he actually had a special detail of handling the Saudis' role of the war in Syria. Right. So all those militants that were being armed, ISIS, al-Nusra, Jaish al-Islam, all these other groups, these were being overseen by this next guy that he cut in line. Right. So it would be essentially like you really pissed off the CIA director and the FBI director. And the FBI director was running, covert operations in another country for some weird reason.
Well, I think that's why you compare a lot of this to the JFK situation, because obviously the Kennedys had at that point pissed off the FBI and the CIA at the same time as well.
Yep. So, Saudi Arabia, it's a lot of people don't realize that much, but it's a modern Game of Thrones going on over there. So it's a vicious blood sport in their country. Another few people that Mohammed bin Salman slighted, one of which was the head of the Saudi National Guard, so like essentially the Saudi military. So he pissed off viciously the CIA director, like the equivalent of the CIA director, the FBI director, and the head of the military. Wow. So he had a lot of enemies there. And I want to say back in 2015, 2016, there was an internal letter circulating within Saudi Arabia, essentially saying, hey, we got to get rid of this guy. This is not the right order of things. We need to, this is going to bring the kingdom down. We got to restore this situation. And so the other thing is the CIA had been grooming the second guy that Mohammed bin Salman cut in line. They had been grooming him for years, kind of lionizing him falsely in the press as this, heroic, leader in anti-terrorism, despite the fact that he was the guy running point on arming militants in Syria,
Mhm.
intelligence agencies around the world with these royals, right? They try to curry favor. They try to kind of like position who they want to be next, right? Of who's going to help serve their interests at the end of the day. And so Mohammed bin Salman cut in line, and he really did so with the help of Donald Trump, right? Currying favor with Donald Trump, having this ally of the United States is a vitally important thing in Saudi Arabia. And so, that really made a lot of his relatives mad. So he faced multiple assassination attempts, one of which was in Las Vegas.
I was going to say, what brought him to Vegas?
2017.
Yeah, what brought them to Vegas? Because I had information, or I was told that it was an arms deal gone bad.
Yep, that is the kind of thinking that a lot of people have been having because he had so many guns in the room. Kind of my thinking is that it was an assassination lineup, like as an arms deal cover, right? So if you want to get a lot of militants into Syria and have them be heavily armed, having someone else bring the weapons, to be arming the plot is, the nicest, easiest way to do that. So they essentially try to pull the assassination attempt off. There's a lot of inconsistencies, right? When people look at me weird that I've never heard this kind of stuff before. There's all kinds of inconsistencies about the official story. One of the most glaring inconsistencies, and we have this on the site, is the fact that the window that he was supposedly shooting out of wasn't broken whenever they actually got to the room. The window in the room next to him was broken. He was renting that room too, but the doors to that room were locked. And so when police showed up, they ended up having to blow the doors between that because they couldn't get in there. So in the room, they found Paddock dead. In the window they said was broken, it wasn't broken. Just very suspicious details there. And
did we not hear that Bill Gates actually owns that floor on the at the MGM?
So the top 4 floors of the Mandalay Bay is actually a Four Seasons, and it was owned by the Saudi royal family, and I believe that Bill Gates, after the fact, bought that off of them.
Got it.
But that is where Mohammed bin Salman was supposed to be at the time, was up on those top 4 floors of the Mandalay Bay. So that gives people some context. But yeah, it was a really wild situation, and one of the things I talk about on my Black Ops page is that throughout history, the covert intelligence services, they like to use criminals and terrorists as covers for assassinations, right? So, causing it, like, it's one thing if you just send an agent and that guy just goes and dies in a very specific kind of laser strike. It's another thing, and there's more plausible deniability if it's like, oh, well, that was just a random terrorist attack and he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? So this is like an established principle with the intelligence services, and something they've done in the past. One of the people in on the plot against Mohammed bin Salman actually had been targeted by a terrorist attack himself for assassination in the past, and it failed. So this is something that was fresh in their mind, and that there was, ample precedent for.
Okay, so how do you know so much? Is it just your study? How do you how have you understood this so well?
One of my big things is D6, right? And working with people who work for D6, right, which is the covert paramilitary wing of the CIA and MI6. People that do all the drug dealing, a lot of the assassinations, all this stuff. So I've very much kind of like had my focus on this D6, both the classification element of it, being the highest level of classification in the US military, and the operational element of it. So I think when you look at something like Vegas, there's a lot of open source intelligence out there that you can kind of grab a bunch of the pieces of this, right? But it's not always clear. So one of the things, Mary Lou Danley, right? She seemed kind of sketchy. Her credit card was in the room. It was under her name. And then supposedly she was out of the country.
Out of the country, like randomly for like 72 hours or something, or less than that. It was like this just happened to be not here. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that other guy, Brian Hodge, right, was that Australian national that he was saying on TV that he was in the room next door. I don't know if that was a slip of the tongue or whatever, but he also knew a bunch of non-public details, right? So the window that wasn't broken, they came out later and said it was broken and that he used a hammer to do it. But before they came out and even publicly said that, this Brian Hodge guy was like, oh yeah, he used a hammer to do that. He knew about Jesus Campos getting shot before that was public information. He knew all kinds of stuff. And he actually worked in the same Gold Coast casinos as Mary Lou Danley. Right. So one of the things I talk about with this D6 thing is when the when the CIA wants to get away with something in the United States, they work with partner intelligence agencies, and they can get foreign agents here who come here on these diplomatic visas. So they have diplomatic immunity. Meaning the police can never question them, and the judges have no standing to see evidence against them, no matter what they do.
Reminds me of
Brian
Jason
Hodge
Bourne.
guy, yeah,
Jason Bourne, a Bourne Identity, you know, or Homeland. We see that in the Homeland, fictionalized.
So this Brian Hodge guy, he knew all this stuff. He was acting super sketchy. A bunch of people wanted to question him, but the FBI prevented anyone from questioning him and just let him leave the country willy-nilly. Also, I believe it was Matt Couch who's done some reporting on how Brian Hodge allegedly was having dinner with Paddock at the Bellagio a few days before. So we got this Danley and Hodge angle with these Australians. We got this, if people have been paying attention to the geopolitical situation, like with the Saudis, as Mohammed bin Salman cut line the first time, there was a German intelligence report that came out that said, hey, he's making a power play. He's going to try to go all the way to the front. And this is going to cause a lot of problems. So there's been people that have had their eye on the ball of the Saudi angle. There's other people that were looking at the helicopters that are flying over, right? So they say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. But even on the open source flight radar, which you can access on the open source intelligence tools from our site, it shows that there's helicopters that flew over there that turned their transponders off, and then that magically after the shooting turned their transponders back on. And it was just this really sketchy situation, but that's open source flight radar data. Many of the cell phone shot videos of the crowd show helicopters overhead. And when researchers go to request these FAA flight records for like what was going on there with these helicopters, the FBI blocks the FAA from releasing those, right? So what is the helicopter? What is the deal with helicopters, and how can the FBI just block it willy-nilly like that? And so we have all the pieces here, and so the nexus to that, right? It seems confusing to a lot of people, but if you understand how this D6 thing works, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense that the Saudis were installed by the British, and the British have a huge aligned vested interest in getting the right person that they want to be next in line for the throne, because the Saudis are essentially like the CIA and MI6's attack dogs in the Middle East that go, it's their proxy that they can get away with a lot more than what these guys could in a direct basis. So understanding that situation, understand that the Australian intelligence services, the commander-in-chief of the Australian intelligence services is the British Royals, right? They're essentially still like a colony over there.
Right. And a lot of my pop culture experts, I say they're going to install Meghan Markle and Prince Harry here in the United States, because that's just how that rolls, because it is still a colony.
They might try, yeah, and it's weird. Like, side digression here, I think it's weird how, I come from a more right-leaning background. It's weird how the right, despite Meghan and Harry, their clownery, their like bashing of the First Amendment, all this and that, I think it's been really weird how that has kind of provoked the right wing of the United States into defending the honor of like Queen Elizabeth and that, ridiculous royal family. So it's like we can hold two ideas in our head at the same time, right? That they could be clowns and these royals could be evil. And I always tell my Republican friends, hey, isn't the whole point of this country to be like, screw those royals, right?
Sovereignty.
Isn't that quintessentially American attitude, is screw those royals?
Sovereignty.
But it's one of those things, it's we get caught into that political trap there. But yeah, so that cover up too, right? It was very JFK-esque, right?
That's where I was going
just
with
the
it.
G-men swoop in and just history has changed. Everything is brushed under the rug, and no matter what, nobody can get any information. And so that is D6, and that is how it goes. And so I think this has a lot of parallels to the JFK thing, right? So they, fraudulently said it was just a lone gunman. They covered up a lot of the evidence. It was a preposterous fraud of an investigation that has all kinds of holes in it.
Which compromised the sheriff, who is now the governor.
Exactly. And
I mean, it looks suspicious just watching his reaction around it. It looked like he went into cover-up mode and then got rewarded for it.
Well, the night that it was happening, he's like up here talking, looking like he saw a ghost, like, and then he's got that very menacing looking FBI agent kind of like staring over his shoulder at him. But that's what they could do. They could say, this is a national security thing. And if you get in our way with this, you will be a national security threat. And so, we have videos on our site of them ordering all the police to turn off all their body cameras. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We have a bunch of videos of both witnesses and police cams of shootings happening 2 hours after they said that Stephen Paddock was dead, all over the Strip. And so it was a massive terrorist attack. One of the most massive terrorist attacks on American soil since 9/11. Right. And everybody that lives in Vegas will tell you that, look, it was like they call it the Men in Black just descended on Vegas, and just every single thing was brushed under the rug. No footage was allowed to be released. And, I think the casinos, they have that aligned vested interest there with the intelligence services, especially if this happened up and down the Strip, to all kind of hold the ranks, to hold the line and say, listen, like, nothing happened here, nothing to see here. Vegas, they've been run by the mafia for a long time in the past. And they want to
Also
make sure
a JFK kind of connection, throwback to that template.
Yep. So they have a huge aligned vested interest for their business sake to pretend like nothing happened. And that's how it works. You cover for the FBI for this national security D6 thing, and all of a sudden you can ascend to the governorship like Lombardo, even though you're not popular at all. So some
we
of my
all
team,
were wondering why President Donald Trump was backing him. I mean, it's what it looked like. It looked like it was a reward for a cover-up.
Yep. And that's one of the things. So my team was actually out there working with a candidate called Joey Gilbert, right? A young, energetic, former professional boxer that had all kinds of connections throughout the boxing and professional fighting world. A great kind of, I would say, America first, a very like in Trump's image sort of a candidate. So it was very perplexing when Trump just kind of let him on for a little while and then just turned and endorsed Lombardo at the last minute. Especially suspicious was, as Trump is starting to endorse him, the Nevada GOP is assembling, right, to kind of like pick who they're going to endorse. And they were getting pressured to do Lombardo. And the state level party pulled out this massive marketing and grassroots campaign, got a bunch of extra people to show up to the convention, and endorsed Joey Gilbert by overwhelming margin.
Yeah, so it's like whiplash watching that happen.
Exactly. So Trump, it would be like him, ignoring like a Matt Gaetz, for example, in order to endorse like a George Bush over the objections of the entire party there, just to kind of like put that in perspective, right? A very establishmenty kind of swamp creature person versus a very youthful, energetic, and America first kind of like cut from his 2016 image, that is, cloth. So it was a very perplexing thing, and that was one of the things I was calling him out for. But that's how it works, and so this is one of the things that I think, I was a Trump fan. I supported Trump both times, but this is the thing. I think Trump, at this point, right, he's definitely part of that cover up, right? That can't happen without him signing off. And I think we kind of got to get him to come clean on that. I think as his supporters, we don't do ourselves any favors when we just kind of like overlook everything bad and just pretend that that's not happening, whether it be the vaccines, whether it be this Vegas thing.
Right.
But this situation, I think he had like 5 minutes aside. So he's getting the call on that night in Vegas, like, hey, there's this massive terrorist attack in Vegas, assassination attempt on the prince. And even if the assassination attempt does not succeed, if there's a massive terrorist attack that comes out on American soil, then this other guy that they wanted to be king in the first place, has been lionized by the press into this, anti-terrorism sort of figurehead, there's going to be a lot of pressure to make him king no matter what, right? Even if you don't succeed at assassinating him. So the people, I'm sure the people advising Donald Trump are like, hey, those people that are dead, we're not bringing them back no matter what. If you cut, all you're going to do is essentially chop off this ally here with MBS and impede your ability to get stuff done in the Middle East. So I think he made that call. I think, he had a couple minutes to make it. I bet it was a hard call. But that ended up being a leash that was used to control him. So later on, for example, in Syria, he didn't want to go to war in Syria. And he was, campaigned on getting out of there and not letting them go crazy with that. But by the end of his presidency, so he says no, the military says yes, and then he kind of just gets his arm twisted. And by the end of his presidency, we had American boots on the ground occupying a third of Syria and stealing a bunch of their oil, right? Not the 2016 Trump that we signed up for right there, right? Then with the Ukraine situation, right, he wanted to push back on that. He says, hey, investigate this crooked deal with Biden, right? And he ends up getting impeached over that. In my humble estimation, it's because when Biden goes to visit Ukraine, he's on one of those diplomatic visas. And so asking that Ukrainian prosecutor to look into that would violate that premise of diplomatic immunity. And so that is essentially poking this nerve that would cause problems for the CIA operations all around the world and other intelligence services too. And so I think he poked that deep state nerve there. So they mobilized, right? It seemed like a fairly benign thing, and they impeached him over that the first time.
Right.
So he goes through this gigantic impeachment battle. He has a bunch of backstabbers, voting against him like Mitt Romney. But then after the fact, after he goes through this, after he fights through that, beats the impeachment, he sends the arms to Ukraine anyways, right? What is going on there, right? So clearly he is being pressured. Clearly they have some leverage on him to twist his arm against that. And, I always tell people, because they get mad at me, they're like, oh, are you just, shilling for DeSantis? It's like, well, I think we're in a tough spot because I don't necessarily think that DeSantis, who was the West Point guy, who was the Gitmo lawyer, right, who was the guy essentially creating the legal pretext to help defend the people torturing people at Gitmo. I don't think he's going to be the one to take these guys to task either. So this is not a pro DeSantis sort of situation at all.
No, and he's apparently a good friend of Jeb Bush, Paul Ryan, and most recently in one of the public events that he just had, he had the lawyers from the Dominion voting software that a lot of people pointed out recently. So, that's what that looks like.
Exactly. So he's a swamp creature. I definitely don't think he's the right choice. But I tell people, listen, if we just ignore what Donald Trump is doing, right, if we allow him to keep doing this, we're not doing ourselves any favor. And I say 2016 Trump, if he looked at 2023 Trump, he would give him an earful. He would give him a nickname and he would take him to task, right? The other thing I think is that subjecting Trump to a bruising primary, right? I hope that people get in there. I hope that people mix it up. And I think that's where Trump was at his best, when it was super competitive, where there was a bunch of other people in there. And I think we're not doing Trump any favors by playing soft on him. I think having that brutal primary, right, where he's forced to kind of like regain his instincts as a fighter there, I think that would be helpful. The other thing I think is that, based on how this thing is done with the vaccines, the most dedicated portions of his base, right, who are vigorously opposed to these vaccines, there's like they just kind of overlook that, right? They they come up with reasons why, Donald Trump, he just must have been getting bad advice or this or that. But the point is, that is a, very, very gravely bad thing that Trump did with giving these evil pharmaceutical companies blanket immunity from all
That
civil and
confused a
criminal
lot of us.
prosecution, right?
Yeah.
That is insane.
Insane.
So if his hardcore elements of his base can overlook that and keep going on there, I think we need to bring this Vegas thing to the forefront, right? Because we need to chop this leash that the deep state has on Donald Trump off, right? We need to put that out there. He's gonna take a little bath of fire there, and
Truth will set you free, though.
exactly. And it's not like the press, right, is gonna be any more negative, right? They're gonna hate him no matter what. His base, his hardcore parts of his base, is gonna support him no matter what. But I think like what we wanted Trump to do in the first place was we wanted those JFK documents, right?
Yeah.
We wanted to show just the levels of this corruption in this government. And that was Trump's job. And he went from going in there saying, I'm going to do that, telling everyone around him he's going to do that, promising his supporters he's going to do that, posting that on Twitter saying, hey, I ordered this to be released. And then magically reversing course and being like, well, it's too horrible. We can't release it, yada, yada.
Is that why he didn't release free Julian Assange? Pardon Julian Assange? Was there any connection to that?
I've been trying to figure that one out too, because with the Russiagate stuff, right? I was one of the people that they're calling, one of the many people that they're calling Russian agents, right? It was a bunch of American and primarily Anglosphere anons, as we like to say, internet trolls. But we realized that the media is blacking out in 2016, and we were using Twitter hashtags, and these things called Fiverr bots. So there's a website called Fiverr back in the day. A lot of media companies were using it too. And you could, for $5, go buy a bunch of likes, subscribes, follows, retweets from these click farms in Eastern Europe, in India, some of these cheap places, right? And so that was the thing that they're calling Russian interference. And you're from the media world. So ironically, you know how like Vice News and BuzzFeed and Huffington Post, they sold for these like obscene valuations, right?
Yes.
So they pushed this Russia stuff, and then Twitter and everybody cracked down on these Fiverr bots, and everybody who bought them realized that like half of their traffic was these Fiverr bots, right? So they took a huge bath. They had to lay off like half their staff. So they essentially like reaped what they sowed there.
I even jokingly have said recently that, when Elon Musk called everybody back to work at Twitter, he was calling the bluff that the fact that there weren't even that many employees, like that was the whole overinflation of Twitter, was the fact that the actual manpower of the company wasn't even true or real.
Yep, and that it's a piece of software, right? You don't need a gajillion people to do that. You just need people to run the software.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with this effort in 2016, everyone who cared to look at WikiLeaks could see that Hillary Clinton's lawyers, as they were doing their assessment of her, like assessing her liabilities, that they had identified your biggest vulnerability is this insanely shady deal that you did with Russia, with uranium. And so they were hatching a strategy. Okay, this is too big. This is too horrible to explain. So how are we going to do, the law of power, the mirroring effect here? And how are we going to put that over onto Donald Trump? So anyone that looked at WikiLeaks could see that this was a fraud, a racket, and a conspiracy from the get-go, right? And Donald Trump had that, information available to him on day one. And so here's where it got weird, is that, ironically enough, Mike Pompeo, right, who ended up becoming the CIA director and the State Department director, he was one of the most vigorous promoters of our efforts and of this WikiLeaks stuff during the election, right? And so I think that's why Donald Trump had tapped him to be CIA director, was because he was like, hey, this guy's brave. This guy's a truth seeker. He's like one of the only people out there in government with his eye on the ball. So I'm going to put him in charge of the CIA, and that will help neutralize them over there. So I don't know if that was an act on Mike Pompeo's part to try to kind of get himself in there and run cover for the CIA, or I don't know if they, had some blackmail on him and flipped him after the fact. Sure. But Mike Pompeo went from before the election, right, vigorously promoting WikiLeaks, to after the election, coordinating with the CIA to try to assassinate Assange. So, the story that they like to say is like, WikiLeaks posted a bunch of stuff that got a bunch of Americans killed, and so we don't care what the rules are. We're going to go after him no matter what. And so I don't know if Donald Trump succumbed to that rhetoric. I don't know if Pompeo kind of like boxed him in there. But that was the thing. With this Russia racket, with this Russia investigation, Donald Trump had the keys to unlock that noose around his neck on day one, and he refused to use it. Right. So that was very perplexing to me. Right. I thought, you got to use all the tools at your disposal. And if the media is going nuclear on you, if the FBI and the CIA are trying to frame you for essentially like treason, right? It can't really get any worse. So making any kind of deals or like placations towards them is not strategically sound move, right?
No.
They're already going nuclear on you. You got to fight back as hard as possible. Yeah. And luckily, you had all the ammo you needed on day one. So I couldn't figure out what the deal was with that.
And just even from my perspective, he went so strong against the pharmaceutical companies, like over the diabetes insulin medication, and making a law that became like accessible and financially accessible, and then going pro-vaccine. It was like cognizant dissonance. Like, what is going on behind the scenes? And so this, you're explaining it on more of a, on a security scale.
Well, even kind of like to that point, he was trying to force hospitals and healthcare providers to have price transparency for his whole presidency, right? Which was a great thing, right? They have this shady thing where they just hide everything. He fought with them through the courts, through everything. They were really pissed about that. He tried to allow people to buy more generics, right? So he was essentially an enemy of big pharma and this healthcare corruption for the entire time. But magically, as the vaccine is coming to fruition, he about faces, and now he is just promoting the vaccine, right? And I think, in my humble estimation here, that had something to do with the fact that Moderna and this mRNA thing, using mRNA vaccines to stop a pandemic, was a DARPA thing, right? Moderna got its start from DARPA back in 2013. They got off the ground with a DARPA grant. And the whole program was like, how are we going to stop a pandemic with this? Fauci was not just the regular civilian healthcare director. He was the leader of the,
bioweapons.
Yeah. So I think what happened there was when it was in the civilian realm that Donald Trump was taking them to task. And when it turned into like this national defense thing, all of a sudden the big bad men in black goons, they have this leash that they can force him into doing what they want. Right?
And he did back the Johnson and Johnson. To be quite, to be fair, he backed the Johnson and Johnson, which is not an mRNA script writing vaccine. So that was the one. He stood by Johnson and Johnson, and that's apparently the one that he got. I know Ivana, his daughter, got the mRNA vaccine, but Donald really stood by Johnson and Johnson, and then Johnson and Johnson got the bad PR campaign that they were the first to be blamed for effects and results, so they shut that down and really got the bad PR for it. At least that's how I experienced and witnessed it and saw how that unfolding.
Yeah, it's pretty funny that anything Trump does, they just hate, right? There's that meme going around that like Donald Trump comes out in favor of air, and it shows all the people like with bags over their heads. Yeah, I thought that was very accurate kind of like depiction of that. But I think that dynamic moving forward can play to our favor, in the sense of I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that this has been ridiculous, that the CDC and the FDA have been hiding data. A lot of like personal family friends of mine that are doctors, right? They were very pro-vaccine and very pro-CDC and all that stuff. And I think over the last 6 months, they're all starting to realize like, whoa, we did not realize like they were liars to this degree. Whoa, this is really bad news here. And whoa, I can't believe that I ever trusted them. So I think as this continues, this trend continues, right? What is going to help a lot of the people who are really hopped up on this COVID propaganda? What is going to help them realize that this is all BS? And I think the fact that Donald Trump had something to do with it is what's going to be the door to unlock that in their mind of like, yes, the government is that evil. And whether you have to blame Trump or whether like you have to blame the CDC or whatever it takes to make you realize that these people are not only not protecting us, they are actively malicious and actively trying to hurt us.
Yeah.
I think that's going to really create a big storm for them
On a
this year.
planetary level. On a planetary level. Harm us on a planetary level. Like, it's like epic proportions.
Every country.
You put out a video. It's on Rumble, and you basically said, "Hey, aren't there any good people in the FBI?" Let's just take a look.
Dear FBI, we all know that you are an evil, crooked gangster mafia, and that many of you are authoritarian menaces that are trampling all of our constitutional rights. But based on mere probabilities alone, some of you, at least some of you, have to be good people. It's statistically impossible for a group that large not to have any good people as part of it. So this message is primarily geared towards those good people, and I'm going to try to appeal to your better judgment here. Good people. Apparently, many of you have been propagandized into believing that you're doing this for the right reasons. To keep people safe from crime, to defend our nation from enemies, to protect and serve us faithfully. But I can assure you that you are not. People are not safe. We are crawling with foreign enemies, and the worst people in our society operate with complete impunity, all under your watch. I mean, read a paper, watch the news, look around. It's very freaking obvious.
The plan is written out on the website, QIntel Pro.
It's QIntel.pro. QIntel.pro. I know that's kind of confusing for some of the older people out there, but it's the way of the future.
QIntel.pro.
Exactly. Instead of .com, it's .pro. So QIntel.pro. Check
and that is where the plan is. And it's really laid out clear. I've sent it around. I'm getting extraordinary feedback from it. People are like, wow, who did this? So it really is smart. Thank you again, Austin, for joining us here on Front and Center. I do hope you'll come back. QIntel.pro is where you can find the plan. You can also find the research about what we were talking about in Vegas and other information. And Austin also has a channel of the Austin Steinbart Show that can be found on Rumble. So please feel free to listen. I'm Jacquie Jordan with Front and Center. If you like this episode, please YouTube us. Subscribe, add us for notifications, and you can always find us where you find all your favorite podcast channels. I'm Jacquie Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Front and Center with Jacquie Jordan podcast. Please subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Instagram at TVGuestpert. We'd love to hear from you.